All right, so in this video, I'm just going to freestyle with the New Retirement Planner software program. I think I've built enough videos, well, not enough videos, but a lot of videos have been reaching out to users who might already be using New Retirement, and I don't think I've created enough content for the person that is like relatively new to New Retirement. And if you haven't heard of New Retirement, it's probably the best comprehensive, big picture DIY retirement planning tool on the market. There's some other tools that are a little bit more niched, but New Retirement is kind of like a generic retirement planning calculator organizer tool where you can do some Roth conversion planning. You can determine when to retire, what rate of return that you need to shoot for, and some other things that I'll kind of show you in this kind of beginner level tutorial. If you're new here, my name is Trent Grigorczyk. I'm the founder of the Retirement Planning Club. And the Retirement Planning Club has over 500 members, and there's DIY investors, there's pre-retirees, there's retirees, all collaborating together within the club. So if you're kind of looking for a educational environment where you can learn about retirement planning and collaborate with others, you should consider joining the Retirement Planning Club. It's free to join. Go to secureyourretirementnow.com. The link will also be below or somewhere around this video. So what I'm going to do is share my screen and just kind of freestyle with New Retirement and where it stands today. This isn't going to be a deep dive into the tool by no means, but it'll just be a kind of a high-level overview of how to kind of get started with the tool. So here we are. This plan has been altered so many times where I'm going to kind of change these assumptions to align a little bit closer with the demographic that is consuming this content, which is pre-retirees and recent retirees. And looks like I was doing this as a younger person. Okay. So the way that this tool is kind of laid out is you have this overview area where you can see kind of how your wealth will look over time. I've white labeled this tool, so that's why you kind of see my picture here and my logo here. So if you have a New Retirement account, you most likely probably don't see this. But if you are interested in signing up for the Planner Plus, we have some really good ways to get access to that within the Retirement Planning Club. Okay, so the first thing I want to kind of cover from a high level is, what do you do when you first log in, right? So how do you know that you're inputting good information? The old saying, garbage in, garbage out, is totally true with financial planning. So the way that they have this set up is, well, one, you'll be taken through an onboarding process initially, but a lot of times people rush through that. They get stuck and they just input willy-nilly kind of their information and then maybe log in later to kind of button things up is kind of how I've seen people do it. And so once you kind of get to this point where you can see the overview and your chance of success in your portfolio. So what you're going to want to do is go to the Accounts and Assets tab and just kind of work your way down. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. So you log in, you input your information, and you head over to the Accounts area. Accounts and Assets, this is where you can tell the system, hey, I have an IRA that has maybe $2 million in it, and the rate of return that I expect to get over time is maybe a 7%. Worst case scenario, very pessimistic rate of return for let's just say a 30-year time frame, or maybe 25-year time frame, let's just say 5%. All right. Pretty common combination. I see I'll use 6%, I'll use 7%. I would say 7% is most common for anyone who is majority stock within their portfolio, even if it's just a 60-40. 5% to average that. Again, this is gross of inflation. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind. 5% for a 30-year time frame for a 60-40 portfolio is still pretty, like, I would say, pessimistic. A big mistake that I see in here is people really underestimating what their portfolio could do. I definitely don't want to advise people to overestimate and plug in 9% or 10% and pessimistically 7%. Like, that's not what I'm telling you to do. And ultimately, this is up to you. This is not advice, but there's plenty of historical data to back up 7% is a quite reasonable rate of return over a 25 to 30 year time frame. And pessimistically, I think 5% is fairly pessimistic. You can plug in 4% if you really want to stress test. But odds are you will not be, if you're invested prudently, you probably wouldn't achieve, less than a 4 to 5% rate of return long term. So work through and input. You can either manually input your information, or what you can do is you can link your account and connect it to using their linking software program. To start, keep it super simple. You don't have to link. You can just say, hey, I have a $2 million IRA, and we're targeting a 7% rate of return. Keep it super simple. You can plug in any more accounts that you might have. Let's plug in a Roth, and let's just say Roth IRA. Roth, you could do 7 or 8%. Let's do 8%. Typically, I encourage people to be a little bit more growth focused in their Roth. That's purely because you are investing in a Roth to take advantage of the compounding tax-free nature. So you want to make sure that you're mostly growth focused in the Roth. So go and add your accounts. I'm going to keep this pretty simple because I just don't want to spend too much time on this one feature. But as you update, if you just jump back to the overview, you'll see this update as well. Okay, you can then plug in whether or not you own your house outright, you own with a mortgage, you're renting. So in this situation, I'm just going to keep it super simple and just say, hey, we don't have a mortgage. And we will input your residence. Common for people to have multiple real estate kind of properties. So you can go through these exercises if you want to add a vacation home, a cabin. Maybe you rent somewhere else in the winter. But the home and real estate area, this is where you'll edit that information and input that information. If you have any other debt, line of credits, credit card, student loans, non-mortgage debts, you'll edit and add that here. Work, if you're a pre-retiree, very easy, very straightforward as far as inputting whatever your monthly. They go on a monthly rate, so you're going to take your gross salary, divide it by 12, and that will get you your monthly salary. Starting now, going to your retirement date. You can kind of leave these as is. Typically, people get some sort of cost of living adjustment with their salary, so that can be, you can keep as is, or if you don't really foresee your salary changing in the next few years before retirement, you can always put these at 0. This is also where you would add deductions. If you had contributions, withholdings from your paycheck, this is where you would input that here. Okay, let me just take a drink of water. Okay, so expenses and healthcare. This is where it can get a little bit confusing for people. From the highest level, I always encourage people to keep this simple. It's easy to get overwhelmed with financial planning tools, and this is where it starts to get a little bit granular, meaning you can create a very detailed budget. You can go through the exercise of totaling up your expenses and going through your credit card statements and actually like dial us in the categories. But if you know your typical recurring living expenses that are, non-debt related, because the debt you would have inputted that already. So if you have a mortgage, you already accounted for that cash flow item. If you have credit card debt, line of credit, something, you already accounted for that. So this is what does it cost to survive, with your food and travel and fixed expenses, utilities, gifts, vacations, clothing, donations, all of those things. Adding up all of that into like one number to start is, I think, best practice. Then what you can do is say, hey, I'm going to validate this number by going through my budget and going through the line items, right? So you can always come back to this and verify it and validate it. But what I don't encourage you to do is just to get stuck here, right? So if you're prudent with your money, you probably know how much you're spending on a monthly basis. If you want an easy way to do that, if you have a credit card, checking account, just look at the cash flow. It's pretty easy to kind of figure out based off of your cash flow of your accounts. If you have any one-time expenses outside of the recurring expenses, you can go through and add those here. That could be a car in 4 years. That could be a family vacation next year. It could be, really anything, a wedding. But you would do that. So the best practice, at least in my opinion, is to this is your main kind of revolving, recurring, living expenses and your regular expenses, and then you feather in these other expenses on top of it. And it's okay that there may be what if, like we don't know for sure if we're going to take a vacation in 4 years. That's going to cost $30,000 to take the whole family to wherever, but accounting for it just to see if we could afford it, does make sense. You can always create a scenario if you didn't want those sorts of like what if expenses to be attached to your baseline plan. Okay, but we're trying to keep this super simple to start. The other thing where people will commonly get stuck is the Medicare expenses, and some people account for this expense in their recurring. And then some people want to have this itemized. Your choice. Whatever works best for your way of thinking. I like to account for it separately because I think it's just erring on the side of caution a little bit. But I do have some clients who are very OCD with their cash flow, and they are definitely like not missing expenses. So they can elect to just remove this, itemize it to zero, and then this would essentially be zero, and because it would be accounted for within this recurring expense that they're already accounting for that expense within there. The long-term care, the best practice that I see is, number one, if you have a policy or plan to purchase one, you would select one of those options. But then also, a lot of people have so much equity in their house towards the end of life that you could just select that as an option. And typically that's fairly reasonable, right? So you get to the end of life in the last few years, you sell your house, you have proceeds, and a lot of that is used for the long-term care costs, right? So that's what I like about NewRetirement is you can actually tell the system, hey, we're not pulling from my portfolio. Those assets are going to be remaining in the portfolio. I'm going to be paying that through home equity. Common, very, very common. So you can instruct the system to pay for your long-term care through, let's see here, through the home equity. Let me just select that for both. Okay, perfect. Okay, money flows. This is where there's a few things on this within this area that can cause things to look really good or really bad. The first one is the excess income. I typically like to say don't plan on saving 100% unless you are very, very, very OCD with your money tracking. So anywhere between 50 and 75% I think is reasonable. Essentially what this means is like if I'm not telling the system that I'm spending it or saving it, I'm assuming it's just going to go, I'm going to be spending it, right? But you can see here that $3.1 million, almost $3.2 million is not being accounted for in excess income over time. So I think that's pretty significant, obviously. So what we're going to do is just select, hey, we're going to save 75% of that to the brokerage account, right? So if I have money coming in either through Social Security, the RMDs, pension, part-time income, if I'm not telling the system that I'm saving it or spending it, we're going to just assume that I will save 75% of it because that at least accounts for a little bit of margin of error with the 25%, but it's not creating an inaccurate representation of our cash flow over time. The other thing in here, Roth conversions and transfers, and withdrawal kind of strategy and how you want the system to dictate your spending. Best practice based on spending needs. If you're telling the system that you need to spend $8,000 a month, there's no reason to be saying that, hey, calculate this based off of a fixed percent. You can test it here, you can test it here, but this is the reality. Again, best practice based on spending needs. Transfers, moving money between accounts. If you're doing any of that, that's where you would dictate in the system if that is happening or not. Roth conversions. What you can do is leave this blank because we can spend some time in the Roth Conversion Explorer area, take what we learned here, and then we can bounce back and then plug in that conversion schedule to see what that will actually look like integrated in with the rest of our plan. So I would say pass on Roth conversions for now. This is not a beginner level conversation, and try to minimize the amount of transfers between accounts as possible just to keep it super simple. We're trying to keep this to keep you moving and not necessarily just getting bogged down in these intricate details. You can also create a scenario and do some moving of money outside of your baseline plan, so you can make a duplicate and then model some of these things in a test scenario. So don't feel like you need to do that in your baseline plan because that's not the purpose of it. The purpose, at least to start, is to input the facts. Estate planning, you can designate what you want as far as a legacy. Yes, let's just plug in $1 million. In today's dollars, that's 586. And then you can go through a checklist of telling the system whether or not you did any of these things. And then that'll give you some motive to either button anything up, review anything, get things updated. This is more of a checklist sort of an exercise. Profile and goals. You can update your personal information as far as your age and month of birth, year of birth. And these are some just kind of for your reference. Here's my objectives in my planning, just to kind of note take to. You can take some notes within the platform. Nothing that moves the levers down here. Assumptions. This is where another area, I keep saying this is where, but this is another area where people can get a little bit mixed up. The system defaults, especially from an inflation perspective, this can really make a big difference to somebody's plan. What you plug in here and account for inflation. Ultimately, this is totally up to your personal preference of how you are giving yourself a pay raise every year in retirement, right? Or even just before retirement. The global inflation rate, the US inflation rate, that is a good data point, but ultimately you're in control for the most part of how much more you spend every year. Now, there's obviously certain things that are out of your control, fuel and food and clothing, like things cost more over time, vehicles, like all these things cost more, but you can always reduce expenses too, right? Or choose not to get a new car, or choose, to drive less, or whatever it might be. So ultimately, you do have control over your inflation rate in real life. But obviously, there's things, if you want to maintain a certain lifestyle, you're going to have to maybe increase your spending every so many years, which might average out to 2%. It might average out to 3%. It might average out to 4%. The long-term historical average, as far as the inflation rate, is commonly around 3.5%, what people typically reference. When I build plans for clients, I usually start with 3.5%, and then if we feel like that's too much, it's inflating their retirement spending too much to the point where it's just not realistic, then we can talk about reducing it. But again, this is one of those kind of like a rate of return preference. This is kind of up to you. But best practice, I will commonly plug in 3.5% for optimistic, and pessimistic 5%. That's very pessimistic for the duration of your retirement. There's kind of a like a mirror effect between some of these, between like Social Security, cost of living adjustment. It'll keep up with inflation, so you could say that's inverse. But I won't even get into that because that's not beginner level kind of conversations of why that would be. But you can also adjust these categories of rate increases over time, either optimistically or pessimistically too, right? But for the most part, the main expense that really kind of dictates the cash flow is the general inflation rate. What do you do? Optimistic, average, or pessimistic? I always stay on optimistic, and that's because my optimistic is very fair. I'm not building the optimistic assumptions that I am plugging into a plan is not like, well, that might happen. Well, no, it should happen, right? A 60-40 portfolio should average a 7% rate of return, a 6 to 7% rate of return over a 25 to 30 year period of time, probably on the low end. And so I think the way that I plug in the assumption of rate of return, or the inflation, tends to be pretty reasonable and pretty fair and kind of expected. The only time that I will get into the average or even pessimistic is just to simply stress test a plan and say like, hey, what if we do achieve a much lower rate of return? Does that really break a plan? Those sorts of things, right? So, but typically I am always hovering between inflation and returns. I'm always selecting optimistic because, like I said, and I keep repeating myself, the optimistic assumptions that I typically plug in are very reasonable, and it's not like I'm plugging in a 9% rate of return assumption or a 1% inflation assumption for a 60-40 portfolio and for a 30-year retirement plan. All right. So up to you. Somebody might be a little bit more optimistic than me on the optimistic settings and maybe settle in on the average, which very well could be close to my optimistic, right? By the time you average optimistic, pessimistic, the average for a lot of people might be what my optimistic is. So it's all about what works for you, how your brain works. But my brain, I like to keep it simple, choose one setting. I have the most control, and I'm not trying to blend too many assumptions together. I try to keep it super simple. And I tend to revert to the 2017 tax rates. It tends to add a little bit more stress to most plans, and I typically always like to err on the side of caution. So you can see in this situation, by toggling between the two, this is better for the plan. If we revert back, it's worse. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for just a second, and take a drink of water. I feel like I'm teaching class. But these are always fun to kind of go through and give these high level kind of tutorials of the different software tools. I mentioned, a lot of my videos are very specific to maybe a little bit more advanced, not like crazy advanced, but assuming somebody has already onboarded a NewRetirement and they're familiar with Roth conversions. And so the intention of this video is to just get you onboarded, give you some best practices of using NewRetirement as a starting point with your retirement planning. So again, if you are looking for help with onboarding to NewRetirement, join the Retirement Planning Club. There's a lot of resources in there that are free. You can always upgrade to get even the Planner Plus version and some other tools that supplement your retirement. And then you get access to group calls, forum, tutorial videos, and it's a lot of value within the club, even as a free member. So definitely consider joining if learning how to build your own plan. Even if you end up hiring a financial advisor down the road, it's really useful to know what goes into building a plan, and then once you know how a plan is built, then you can know how to hire the right person. And so jumping into hiring somebody without learning how something might work, even if it's high level, might not be the wisest choice for somebody who's looking to switch advisors, hire an advisor for their first time. So again, this is just my opinion. The best path that you could take if you're looking to go self-directed, hire a new advisor, switch advisors, hire your first advisor, learn how to do it yourself, even if it's high level first, because then you can appreciate what they're doing for you, and you know what to ask them and their processes as far as how do you build a plan and what's entailed, and that's how you can kind of sniff out people that are truly like comprehensive planning with you versus just plugging you into a very cookie cutter calculation. Okay, bouncing back to NewRetirement. After you have kind of plugged everything in, you can go to your overview and kind of see how great this chart looks. This is a beautiful chart, right? Somebody is 67 and their wealth just keeps compounding over time, and by the end of life, they're going to have an abundance of wealth, right? Take this half serious. This is 26 years of assumptions. We don't know what life's going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, let alone 20 to 25 years. We don't know that. So don't get overly obsessive about, look at all this money. Odds are, that it's not going to be as significant as somebody might be forecasting. And that's just because things come up, and you might want to enjoy retirement a little more than you think, and spend as you should what you so diligently saved. So if you go to the overview tab after completing the inputs, you can see the trajectory. A few things that I reference. Probability is important. So the system will run 500 random scenarios, which is a Monte Carlo, and it'll give you how many scenarios were successful, and well, all of them were essentially successful, which is good. The next one that is useful to reference is the average income and average expense. So the system is forecasting that we are going to need about $9,300 a month to pay for our retirement. But the system is telling us that we're going to have potentially $14,000 a month. That is fixed income from pension, Social Security, part-time work, what have you, whatever it might be, rental income. And then what the system does is it takes a 4% distribution in drawdown to add on to that fixed income. So it's pretty cookie cutter, but it's a starting point. Again, this is a quick starting point to determine how much money could I expect to have coming in, and how much am I expected to need to go out. Usually you don't want to see, or I would say most of the time you don't want to see this inversed. So you don't want to see 14 over here and 9 over here, right? Because that means, well, you could run out of money. We don't want that. So those are some reference points, which in this hypothetical scenario, I would say that's all in good order. The other thing I like to reference right off the bat, if you go to Insights and then you go to the lifetime cash flow, this is going to reflect what I just showed you in a way. Here's expenses, here's income. You can see income is non-existent until Social Security kicks in, RMDs kick in, distributions kick in. So then now income is now exceeding expenses at this point, right? So in a common situation, I would look at this and say, well, do Roth conversions make sense? And that's when you can start getting into income's going to be really low. Should we claim income now and not have as much income in the future? So you could, go into the Explorer, Roth Conversion Explorer, and say, hey, what if I filled up the 22%? And could I increase my situation? Well, it looks like I might pay more in taxes, but I could have a little bit more in my nest egg. So a net gain of maybe $400K would be my net gain from a hypothetical conversion schedule. And they have different selections. You can stay within the IRMA bracket limit. You can target lowest lifetime tax liability. You can target, so that looked pretty attractive. Lifetime taxes saved, estate value at longevity. So this looks like a pretty good scenario for this hypothetical person. Highest estate value, you can solve for that, which tends to be looks to be the most optimal, I should say, based off of the 3 variations that I've run so far. And then it gives you the conversion schedule, and it seems to always be so random, which could make sense. But I always encourage somebody to really take this not half serious, but this is not just to be executed right away. This is very draft. This is a mock plan, and you're going to want to assess every single year. Okay, what is my income forecasted to be this year? How much money do I have set aside to pay for the taxes on a Roth conversion? And does it still look like it's going to benefit me? Right? So this is not the end all, but this is a good starting point to say, hey, I probably should consider Roth conversions, and what should I expect as far as a conversion amount, and in what year? anything else I want to cover today? This video has been probably going on too long. Surplus gap is kind of another one I like to look at. Just kind of showing you like how much what's the negative cash flow or cash flow positive in a chart like this. So you get to a point where income is high enough from your sources, where there is this surplus, which is what I dictated into the system to save 75% of that. So that's why you see the light purple, which is 75% of the total bar there. So I tend to reference that. I tend to look at the withdrawals. I look at the savings over time, savings balances based on the account types, where the growth is coming from and contributions to the building of wealth, withdrawals, RMDs. All of these are useful, but I would say withdrawals, savings, surplus gap, lifetime cash flow, and maybe projected net worth is quite useful as well, as far as the reporting after inputting everything into the plan. And then looking at those and trying to optimize things from there is kind of my thought process. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is start doing more of these videos live, just kind of like classroom style, where I come up with a pretty beginner level or easy to understand starting point for people that are wanting to use NewRetirement, or just maybe even a refresh of you've used the tool for a while, you got confused, you have 20 different scenarios, you don't even know what everything's doing, and maybe you need a refresh and reset. Hopefully these videos that I'll start pumping out that are NewRetirement focused will be of value to you. And if this video has been any bit of value to you, just give me a like, subscribe if you haven't already. But most importantly, join the Retirement Planning Club if you are looking for a support group to help you through this process. If you want my help, great. If you just want community help, there's 500 plus people within the community that are, the vast majority of them are using NewRetirement. Many of them are very experts and very fluent with the tool. So you can not only leverage my expertise and tutorials and responses to your questions, but you can leverage your peers who are actually going through pre-retirement phase, retirement phase, and there's just a gold mine of collaboration and information within the Retirement Planning Club. So thanks for joining me on this video. Go to secureyourretirementnow.com if you want to join the Retirement Planning Club. And that's it for now. I will see you within the club or on the next video. Take care.